Welcome to all of our visitors worldwide. I know you dialed in from Europe, from far west, from far east. Appreciate much your commitment to the time zones, and I welcome you on behalf of aicas to this second installment of our aicas 20 years celebration series. Today, welcoming you here to the IoT Roundtable from Edge to Cloud. I'm joined here by Dr. James Hunt, our CEO of aicas. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Johannes. Welcome, everyone, and I'm looking forward to an exciting discussion today.
Thank you, James. So here in Karlsruhe, my name is Johannes Biermann, by the way, president of aicas. We're celebrating 20 years, and we have, for this occasion, for this IoT Roundtable, assembled actually an exciting roster of executive speakers to talk about the IoT evolution. And this will, as you've seen in the announcement already, talk about some of the big challenges that we see in IoT. And we'll do that also starting with a market research analytical point of view. So we have a lead speaker here that I will introduce in a moment. Before I do that, I'd like to talk about aicas for a brief moment. We celebrated 20 years on May 3rd, which was this week on Monday. And we celebrate the occasion in two ways. One is that our wonderful employees worldwide who celebrated with us the founding in 2001 of our company. And you've seen earlier on the video roll the great evolution and development of this great company. Secondly, we have been doing this business for, in light of digital transformations all along. We are committed to embedded software solutions. We work with companies in automotive, in industrial markets, other verticals. And our mission is really to enable those customers and partners through the software that we provide on embedded pathways. For example, infotainment, it may be telematics, it may be operational processes and manufacturing that we're supporting. As luck has it, last year, going on 20, we surpassed 20 million licenses deployed worldwide. Very proud of that and counting. And as part of that, also, we want to use this opportunity here to start celebrating this year through a series of roundtables. So stay tuned. Welcome to all of our visitors worldwide. I know you dialed in from Europe, from far west, from far east. Appreciate much your commitment to the time zones, and I welcome you on behalf of aicas to this second installment of our aicas 20 years celebration series. Today, welcoming you here to the IoT Roundtable from Edge to Cloud. I'm joined here by Dr. James Hunt, our CEO of aicas. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Johannes. Welcome, everyone, and I'm looking forward to an exciting discussion today.
Thank you, James. So here in Karlsruhe, my name is Johannes Biermann, by the way, president of aicas. We're celebrating 20 years, and we have, for this occasion, for this IoT Roundtable, assembled actually an exciting roster of executive speakers to talk about the IoT evolution. And this will, as you've seen in the announcement already, talk about some of the big challenges that we see in IoT. And we'll do that also starting with a market research analytical point of view. So we have a lead speaker here that I will introduce in a moment. Before I do that, I'd like to talk about aicas for a brief moment. We celebrated 20 years on May 3rd, which was this week on Monday. And we celebrate the occasion in two ways. One is that our wonderful employees worldwide who celebrated with us the founding in 2001 of our company. And you've seen earlier on the video roll the great evolution and development of this great company. Secondly, we have been doing this business for, in light of digital transformations all along. We are committed to embedded software solutions. We work with companies in automotive, in industrial markets, other verticals. And our mission is really to enable those customers and partners through the software that we provide on embedded pathways. For example, infotainment, it may be telematics, it may be operational processes and manufacturing that we're supporting. As luck has it, last year, going on 20, we surpassed 20 million licenses deployed worldwide. Very proud of that and counting. And as part of that, also, we want to use this opportunity here to start celebrating this year through a series of roundtables. So stay tuned for that, as well as products that we're going to roll out in the short term. With that and further ado, I'd like to introduce actually Marco Becker. Marco Becker is an analyst from IDC, senior consultant, in fact. He's been working with IDC since 2019. And he will talk about what we call the edge on the rise, very markedly, edge on the rise. And he himself worked with many customers and partners through study sessions, study projects, research in uncovering what is the bigger picture behind edge on the rise. His focus is really on IoT, cloud storage, and the entire space of IoT. And so he will provide us a keynote with a lot of rich content that is good for discussion then later with our speakers. And I welcome at this point Marco Becker. And I would say to Marco, please pick up from here.
Yeah, thank you, Johannes. Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me. Let me quickly start the presentation. So, my name is Marco Becker. I'm senior consultant with IDC, and I'm very happy to shed some light today on the challenges of edge computing implementation in the upcoming years as edge is on the rise. And for those who doubt that edge is on the rise, I have some IDC Edge predictions to back my claim up. So first of all, by 2022, we expect that edge infrastructure spending will reach $33 billion. That's the result of a 19% growth per year, which is already an impressive number, but it's even more impressive if we compare it to core infrastructure spending, which will only grow by 2.6% a year over the same period. So we have a massive shift here. We also expect that 2023, 70% of the enterprises will run varying levels of data processing at the IoT edge. And only 1 year later, 60% of the industrial organizations will integrate data from edge OT systems with cloud-based reporting and analytics to gain company-wide insights into operations. And as by 2023, over 50% of new enterprise IT infrastructure will be deployed at the edge rather than central data centers. We will see that the number of apps at the edge will increase by 800% until 2024. And last but not least, we have the assets, and we will already see next year a 10% improvement in asset utilization, which is enabled by 50% increased AI usage in new industrial assets that are edge-enabled. So indeed, edge is on the rise, and we see much market movement, but there are also some factors that might challenge your edge adoption. And I've clustered them into 9 categories that we are going through now one by one. First of all, we have some geographical frame conditions. You cannot really influence them, but they most likely will influence your edge adoption. And first of all, we have cloud providers and telco providers. Most of your edge use cases won't be limited to a single site. So cloud and telco providers will play an important role as connectors worldwide between countries and between sites, between companies, and between edge devices and the ones who want to process their data. So providers are trying to get as close as possible to the edge environments of their customers. Cloud providers by building metro data centers and offering hardware as a service, and telco providers by optimizing their networks, rolling out 5G, and enabling multi-access edge computing so that they can offer their network infrastructure for the edge use cases of their customers. So your challenge is here to keep track on the market which providers are building up edge capacity close to your sites or close to your use case so that you can maybe leverage it and use it to complement your edge infrastructure. Second point is about privacy and regulation, as regulation is changing. A good example is Safe Harbor, which was judged irregular some years ago and replaced by Privacy Shield, which was judged irregular last year. So you have to take into account that regulation can change any time, and it's even more important for companies that are doing business in more than one country. So you have to make sure that your edge use cases are robust to regulation change, or even more that you are flexible and agile enough to quickly adapt to new regulations so that business processes aren't harmed. Last point here is the worldwide chip shortage, which is influencing device production on all tiers. So you have to make sure that your suppliers are still able to deliver you the edge devices you ordered, and the same is true for cloud and telco providers. So their investments may be slowed down too due to chip shortage, but we hopefully have an end of chip shortage by end of the year. We will see how this will evolve. Second point is about strategy, business cases, and ROE. Very important for every edge development is to have an edge strategy that consists of business objectives and measurable success criteria. You need both to make good decisions about everything in edge, about the architecture, about the skills and budgets you need, and about the components you use. And what we can see is that companies often lack one or maybe even both pillars of a good edge strategy, which makes good decisions very hard. And it's even more true for business cases monetization. So we often see companies adopting a new technology like edge because it's a trend, rather than adopting it because it really makes sense in case of a business case that can be monetized, and so that you can justify your investments. So last year, 17% of the European interviews we asked about edge stated that edge already was an operational requirement. So here we can assume that there is a business case, at least cost cutting, or maybe even a new business case. And for 73%, it only was a strategical investment. And don't get me wrong, that's great for edge adoption, but it also means they have enough foresight to know it's important for the future, but they most likely don't have explicit use cases, which makes investment decision very hard. And that brings me to the next point, the vendor differentiation and specialization. There's not only one edge, but several edges with different requirements. So for example, the industrial edge for manufacturing companies has other requirements than the enterprise edge, which is more focused on office buildings. So we have a rising variety on the market of vendors and solution, and the market is nowhere near maturity, so it gets more and more, and it becomes increasingly difficult to find the right combination of solutions. And even finding one right solution is hard because there is no one size fits all for edge solutions. So they vary depending on the workload, if it's rather a big or small workload, mobile or immobile, harsh environment or clean environment. So if you don't have a good edge strategy and explicit use cases, the right decision becomes nearly impossible. And the last challenge is to answer the question if you should do it yourself or getting help. So there are lots of solution integrators and consulting organizations that are already specializing on IoT and edge, and they may help you with strategy, implementation, or managed services. And you have to ask yourself if it's worth to give up some independency and hand that over to a partner, but on the other hand, get more resources to actually use and leverage your edge infrastructure instead of implementing and maintaining it. And as we get a little bit more technical here, the next challenge is the right connectivity choice. There are lots of connectivity methods out there, and based on your edge use case, which will be quite unique, you will have to make a unique choice on your connectivity. So if you have large data amounts, high latency requirements, and how much energy can be used. And on the same time, you have cost constraints. And it gets even more difficult if you need to make a connectivity combination. So there are some use cases in which you have to apply multiple methods of connectivity. In fact, last year, we asked German industrial interviewees about the connectivity types they use in their IoT projects. And as you can see with the dark blue bars, they have already been using lots of connectivity variations, but they are planning to use even more in the next 24 months to complement their own connectivity landscapes. And by end of the 24 months, every company will have at least 3 connectivity methods in use on average. And there are new challenges with that. For example, for the ones who adopt 5G, 66% of them are planning to implement or are already implementing own private 5G networks that they have to operate or that have to be operated by a vendor. And speaking of vendors, there are lots of vendors, cloud vendors, especially EOS vendors or CDNs that are offering services for latency or bandwidth critical workloads or virtual network functions and cloud network functions. So there are a whole lot new puzzle pieces to optimize your edge infrastructure. And the challenge is to find the right puzzle pieces and put them together for your use case. And as you use more and more solutions and services, and especially manufacturing companies already have very heterogeneous landscapes, you will run into challenges about compatibility and standardization. And there are already supplier ecosystems out there that work on compatible solution ecosystems or even standardized frameworks. And the challenge here is to find the right ecosystem that serves all your needs and to have enough foresight to decide which of the ecosystems will remain, because always there are some ecosystems that won't be successful, others will have the most suppliers that comply with the new standards. So the question is who will win the race? And another aspect is the period of use of edge devices that exceeds common support life cycles, especially for IT infrastructure. So 22% of the German industrial interviewees plan to use their edge devices at least 10 or even more than 20 years, and 51% even for at least for 5 to 10 years. And as we know, manufacturing companies, they use their devices even longer than they planned. So standardization becomes important here because it enables stability and it gives a sudden guarantee that the devices you buy now that are standardized can be used in edge use cases that are maybe 5 or 10 years ahead. And the last point here is cloud native and software-defined technologies. Many new solutions will be based on them because they enable agility and scale. And so you have to make sure that you gain knowledge on that. And as most of these solutions have a strong open source footprint, you should make sure that you have also an open eye on the open source community. And that's even more important if we see that 95% of the planned new edge solutions in companies worldwide will be built on cloud native platforms. And the future of business often will be company ecosystems in which data and services are shared for more added value. And if you want to be part of those company ecosystems, you have to make sure that you can work with cloud native platforms. Another rather technical challenge is the core edge endpoint balance. So where to deploy your edge devices and workloads. And they are based on your explicit edge use case as well. So if you are more about latency, you will be higher in that endpoint stack, in this edge stack, more on the endpoint tier, which is purple here. Or if you are more for large data and advanced analytics, you will be lower in the stack on the core tier. And it's already difficult to find the right position here because sometimes you will have conflicting requirements. And it gets even more complex because there are lots of vendors we already talked about that are offering new services in this stack. So like the multi-access edge computing from the telco providers or the regional metro and core clouds from cloud providers. What's on the one hand good because you have more options to optimize your edge use cases. But on the other hand, it gets more complicated to find the right combination because you also have cost constraints that may limit your options because you have to remain profitable. Many challenges can come also with edge skills. Actually, training of IT and company operators is the main challenge for companies right now. Because on the one hand, we have new IT technology like cloud, container, and software-defined, which are quite new, but they enable flexibility and they have strong orchestration capabilities that support large numbers of devices and apps, and that's very beneficial for edge computing. And on the other hand, we have to make sure that we have the right digital engineering capabilities, and digital engineering is about combining operational knowledge and the technology skills. And the digital engineers are very important for the future because they have the task to make sure that operations data is used to make resilient decision-making. So they have to make sure that the data is used and can be used by humans or AI to make the right decisions, and that's a big task. When we're speaking about operational knowledge, of course, IT-OT convergence is one of the main challenges for especially manufacturing companies. And the first big challenge is, again, a challenge of choosing the right partner. We see more and more IT and OT market leaders to form strategic partnerships. And we see more and more companies with OT to partner up with service vendors, with IT service vendors, so that they can leverage their global network and infrastructure capabilities. And it's difficult because most companies already use certain IT solutions and they already have OT solutions. And you have to make a choice if you want to leverage the full strategic partnership and if you have maybe to exchange some of the solutions, which is rather difficult because most of these solutions are integrated very deeply in the companies, and making a change here is a difficult task. The next point is about software-defined infrastructure again, and that should underline its importance. And we expect that 2024, it will be used by always 70% of the industrial G2000 companies, because it has a major advantage that it can run IT and OT workloads both on the same hardware. And that makes it obviously very benefiting for IT OT convergence if I have them so close to each other. Another important point is to update the data governance for IT and OT data, as OT data is entering IT systems, but also clouds and the infrastructure of service partners. And you have to make sure that your operational teams have clear rules how OT data can be processed and where it can be processed, so that they can be innovative but still maintain the quality and integrity and security of the OT data. And the last important challenge here is to find the path from IT-OT coordination to IT-OT convergence by establishing the digital engineering skills. So for now, we often have that setting of coordination, but with different reporting paths. And that's, of course, not the most efficient way and not the fastest way to make innovations happen. And so you have to find a way to be more collaborative on that side and converge not only IT-OT, but also IT and OT skills, so that you, at the end, have digital engineers that have knowledge of both sides, that only report to the operations team, and that are agile, fast, and flexible and innovative. And we also have lots of challenges in the security and IT management. First of all, of course, you have to ensure a holistic, seamless security. End-to-end edge workloads often span the whole path from public to private cloud to edge and to endpoints. And you have to make sure that security is in place for every single step of data transmission and processing. And you have to make sure that you have enough transparency. As we have already seen, the number of apps will increase massively, and you have to make sure that you have a good API management to have an oversight which APIs are in use, where they are used, and if they are patched and updated and secure. And another challenge is that in edge locations, often little to no IT staff will be present, or the devices will be inaccessible. And so you have to find a framework for low or zero touch provisioning for updates and patches. And as we have more and more data and devices, you will need strong automation capabilities, and you will need proactive security measures, because manually adapting security processes or policies will not be feasible anymore. And speaking of devices, as we have more and more different devices, we also need very strict device guidelines of which devices can be integrated into the landscape. And we have the need for holistic device lifecycle management, which enables long-term support, because as we have already seen, many companies plan to use their edge devices for decades. And by that, we have discussed the last category of challenges. And the bottom line is to not let these challenges prevent you from adopting edge, as long as it makes sense for you. These challenges should rather be noticed and taken into account, should be considered when you are defining your edge strategy and making your edge decisions, so that you don't run in problems. And I made a little effort to derive some essential advice from that challenges. First one is to be use case centric. So you should have goals that you are trying to reach with your edge use cases, and it should be business case dependent. So you should always have in mind how you want to monetize your edge use case. Second is that edge infrastructure has other constraints than core infrastructure. And so you have to design edge infrastructure to meet service level objectives that are, for example, made by the business and are about resiliency or flexibility or capacity. Third point is to leverage software-defined infrastructure and software-defined infrastructure management, because it's very beneficial for edge, because it has these strong management and orchestration capabilities, and it enables remote management of many devices. And you will need to update your data management. So you have to make sure that you have a hybrid data management architecture that takes care that all the data that is distributed about edge locations, maybe all over the world, are properly managed, and that you can apply compliance and governance to all these data. And last but not least, we have the multi-pronged always one approach to security, which is very, very important, because most companies, and even more the manufacturing companies, have zero tolerance for security breaches. So you have to make sure that every level in the edge stack is secured, and that there is security in place any time and any place, so that you can make sure that there are no attack vectors that can maybe chain down and may influence your whole OT and business processes. And by that, I'm at the end of my keynote. I want to thank you for your attention, and by that, I give the word back to you, Johannes.
Okay, thank you very much, Marco. Really nice broad stroke across the edge on the rise in its different aspects, and I think this is really a great starting platform for the conversation that we're going to kick in now. By the way, I saw questions on the chat regarding the slides. This all is going to be recorded. We're on a BrightTalk platform, and yes, of course, you will be able to see and download those contents through a link that will be provided to you after the presentation. Also like to point out that we have done our own supporting study, very much congruent with what Marco from IDC just described. You can download that as well based on request from the aicas website, just a side note. So, roundtable. We have a lot of great speakers here. I just want to go briefly through the bios. You see them on the screen now here. And I go about from upper left to the right. You already know me sitting there with the speakers in the different regions. So we have Bill Osach here, for example, connected industry strategy and corporate development leader, has been doing this for more than 20 years, broad stroke across various IoT areas with a diverse background also in M&A and investment, as well as strong software development managerial experience. He also had been leading the software development, corporate development actually at Wind River Systems, amongst other things. We have Kai Hackbarth from Bosch.io. Kai, business owner industrial at Bosch.io. Welcome, Kai. And more than 20 years of experience again in many facets of the IoT middleware and device management. He's really an evangelist. I've known him for some time, and product manager. I've been in many roles. Great partner of yours if you want to talk to somebody about IoT. Like all the others, great contact. And then we have Gonzalo Perez Rodriguez from Telefonica. Heard a lot about connectivity earlier. 5G was mentioned all over the place. Of course, we think telecom. Somebody needs the juice. The juice needs to flow through something. There's connectivity. So Gonzalo certainly represents this based on his background from Atos, a large ICT company, part of the ICT companies. And also he joined Telefonica to really link startups with large organizations around IoT. So he will bring in a particular external perspective on the IoT market. Then we have Farid. Farid, chair of the Smart Factory Working Group at the Industrial Internet Consortium, which is a consortium that we're a member of as well, proud member to be very honest, that devotes itself to a lot of the industrial IoT challenges in various places. He is also CTO of AASA and has a broad multinational background with various corporations that he worked for about 20 years now as well. He's based in Washington, D.C. And then, of course, you know Marco Becker already through the presentation. So I would say, where do we start? Where could we start? So I start with actually what I call an open question to all of you. So years back, I was working in different environments. Everything was about the cloud. Then it's all about the edge. Then it's about the cloud, the edge. So is it edge to cloud, cloud to edge? Bill, let me ask you the question.
Thanks a lot, Johannes. And this might be a little bit of echo of Marco's presentation there, but to me, the core catalyst for this is the fact that edge computing has a symbiotic relationship with the cloud. And it's all about doing compute where it makes sense for the use case. I do think the biggest recent catalyst has been the push by cloud providers to the edge. Now, that could be the telco edge, could be on-premise edge, whether industrial or enterprise, or the far edge, the most difficult of them. But to me, cloud to edge is my leaning. So it really is a loop between all those.
Okay, good. Kai, your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah. So I would say it depends also on the use case, right? So it really depends on also technical requirements, latency, real-time capabilities you might have, right? So it also depends on basically how you want to monetize your service, if you want, right? Do you want to have like a monthly fee, or do you want to sell a solution? And you want to avoid that. You have seen this in the smart home domain, where the cloud service is disconnected and the devices at home are basically not usable anymore, right? So and I think 5G also has an impact here. It brings, I think, the cloud to the edge, if you want.
Okay, good. Well, that's a nice loop back over to Gonzalo. So from your point of view as a telecom provider, an infrastructure provider, so what's your thinking around, is there a domination? Is it a combination? Gonzalo, what do you think? What do you see?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you and wish a happy birthday to aicas.
Thank you.
It's worth mentioned. But regarding the question, I think that I always say that cloud to edge, it's there is no edge without cloud, but there is cloud without edge. This is fair enough, but the point when we're looking for this mix, and I agree to Bill that there's a combination of both. The point is to get closer to the final user and do so in a more distributed way rather than in just one single backend. So in that sense, what we're looking for is how can we have our CDNs less saturated so we can have more information, and not only more information, but more relevant information. So for example, we have had to move our CDNs to the edge in order to be able to provide a better service for our client, especially in the V2C business, actually. But it's true that from our perspective, we see the cloud and then we have an edge, right? And we provide that service in the edge. But then it's a loop, as we were saying. The edge has to come back through the cloud. So that's why we're actually really committed with the cloud, and that's why we've created a company just to work on that. This Telefonica Tech that we created just last year. So it's definitely a key market and extremely interesting market.
Excellent, yeah, and we'll talk about that later for sure. So Farid, from your point of view, as you engage in the Industrial Internet Consortium, you have a very wide-ranging view with all your partners. Is the jury out? Are we all at the edge or somewhere in the middle? And it depends on use case?
Good. First, let me echo Gonzalez on congratulating ICAS on 20th on behalf of IAC and also ASA. And hopefully we see 100 more years on top of the 20th. So I will agree with all the other speakers as well. This is a hybrid. This will be a hybrid solution going forward. It just depends on the business model that you have and basically the requirement that you have and objective that you do. Which one will be a little bit more bold in this hybrid solution? But again, I want to echo also what Kai said about the 5G 16th version that got released a little bit late, actually last year because of the COVID situation. That also is that about to cloud to edge a little bit more, and also made the IoT generally and the edge generally more possible because of the capability and less latency, which matches the IoT and edge situation, or let's say configuration for making that possible. So I go with hybrid, and exactly based on the business model and the objectives of the use case.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Farid. And this kind of like loops back to maybe how we look at also the participants. So I'll point this question maybe to Gonzalo, because in your role, you're for Telefonica, you're an innovation unit, you're looking for partnerships, you're looking for the right partners, the ones that are engaging. And I know that we have all gone through the last year. The pandemic has really accelerated a lot of the digital transformation. So maybe that's a question to you to say, from your point of view, what do you look for if you look at partners in the wider IoT space that makes sense from your perspective to partner with?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've been answering this very similar question many times. So in order to get a broader idea about how do we invest and why, just let me just briefly explain. There are 3 investment vehicles in Telefonica plus 1 program to like kind of incubate earlier startups. The program to incubate is called Open Future. And then regarding the investment vehicles, we have the wider vehicle, which is tickets from 50K to 250Ks, company valuation up to 20, 30 million. So it really depends on the specific case. Then we have the Telefonica Ventures team. They go from 300K up to 6, 7 millions. And then we have the M&A team that just covers the rest of the range. Basically, our investment thesis in IoT and all the fields is that feed first, invest follows. And this means that we invest in startups or business that then we can develop a joint product or service. So in this case, I'm very closely related to a unit called Telefonica Tech, that they have 3 main branches. It's cybersecurity, cloud, and IoT big data. So as you see, this already gives you a clue of how do we look at the market. Cyber is key for us. We just bought a couple of companies last year. And cloud and IoT are growing a lot. And we want to have a bigger impact because we have the networks, and what we're developing is the use cases. So for example, when I think about the investment thesis and I think about the companies that we have in our funnel and in our portfolio, we are looking for companies related for industry 4.0, for example. We're looking for companies related to energy, because we're trying to open the market. That's why I work in open innovation, not only because we work with external companies, but because we try to get a wider idea of what can we do out there. So it would be industry 4.0, energy, retail, sports, and B2C business. Actually, in B2C, we kind of have a bit more broadband in the sense that we are able to disrupt more, because our core base, as you all know, it's more B2C. So therefore there we can invest in more seed companies or tech bets. For example, if we're talking about things related to just simultaneous translation, for example, or co-watching startups, these kind of things. If you go back again to the B2B, we're looking for companies related to smart buildings, smart metering, smart cities, everything with the word smart. You know that is something that normally it's appealing. And the idea then is that we kind of filter all these startups, and we then verify with our business units if we could do something together. That could be a little bit.
So let me bring in Bill to the conversation. So Bill, from your point of view, I know you're working with a lot of the IoT startups. You're based in at the West Coast. You see a lot from that perspective. So your view, and what are some of the identifiers that you look for that will shape kind of like the IoT evolution that Marco basically outlined so large? There's a lot of opportunity out there, obviously.
Yeah, and this will echo a little bit of what Gonzalo said there. When you talk about opportunities or valuations, you got to step back, and it's not about technology. It's about the fundamentals of problem. Is there a problem out there? Do they have a solution? And do they really have an unfair advantage in what they're building there? And that really drives the valuation there, not necessarily technology, like X or Y. And it's whether that solution is for a use case or a solution to plumbing, but it really has to go after a problem there. I think the other, and this is another angle to this, is it's really about scalability and productive refinery of data. So we talk about data being a new oil. I think the real opportunity that we start seeing now with this cloud to edge, or edge to cloud, is really the productive refinery of the data there.
That's an interesting point of view. Yeah, very good. Excellent. Good. So let's switch gears a little bit to, and I want to point this to Kai, because we talked about diversity. You see, there's a lot of, some people may say there's a lot of IoT platforms. There are a lot of market participants. From a customer point of view, really all hands on deck in order to find the right partner, basically. And I think the underlying piece seems to be that edge environments are tremendously diverse. So what are some of the best practices from your point of view as you look at the edge environment, think about the aspects of like sharing app logic across millions of devices that you basically advise your customers on, that you help your customers on with, that will make them successful. Kai.
All right. Yeah. So I guess one of the most important aspects is modularity. And I'm talking now about not end devices, but more powerful devices, gateways here, right? So modularity is basically key, where you separate your functionalities in different modules. You can sort of reuse them. You can customize them. This helps you also to individualize, let's say, the respective environment. So if we talk about cars, so you may have one and the same platform in different aspects, if you want, or with different aspects in every model. Yeah. But so certain features, may not be available for certain types of cars, if you want, right? And then I think what is also important is that you try, like I said, to reuse as much as possible. For example, also to make use of technologies like Java in order to avoid compiling your code for every environment again and again. So there are many things you can do, right? And obviously, IoT environments are also by nature something that change over time. So they are not static. So OTA is obviously also a key aspect, right? So you want to be able to ship security bug fixes and new features to those devices, right? And also here, modularity helps you because if you do that, you don't have to send over a large firmware update. You rather send one respective software component that is affected, right? So so that may be some of the few aspects to consider here.
Excellent. Yeah, great. I know, Farid, you also work with a lot of customers on shaping best practices. So you just heard about also processes like OTA.
Yes.
Kai mentioned even programming languages like Java, for that matter. The modularity is key. What's your thought on that as you look at the
No, I agree.
corporations?
Yes, I agree with Kai about the modularity, but generally from the design perspective, when you have the diverse, right now we talked about the hybrid situation, you should not think when you're designing, you should not think cloud or you should not think edge. You have to make sure you understand this hybrid situation that you're walking in. So your design and your you think globalization and different nodes that you're going to put where things going to be, right? So you have to make sure the design and architect is not going to make you restricted in certain way of solution, because you don't know what's going to come next on the upgrades and updates and what it's going to be when it's going to be on the next plan, right? Based on the data, based on the use cases that they may change and the objective that you have to go and focus on. So use those kind of platforms that it's compatible everywhere, and also bring it to, as Kai said, on the design in a modularity, so it's make it easier in future for updates, upgrades, and basically making it compatible with the future planning and future visions that you may have on the edge and cloud or cloud to edge.
Okay, great. Very good to hear. It almost reminds me of, sometimes when I listen to this, it almost reminds me of like the IT environments where you kind of like plug and play, and you want to basically run an update through inside your firewall. Now I understand OT environments, of course, are we experience it every day, are very different. All of a sudden you tap into the real life, somebody would say, outside the firewall. And so, Bill, I know you've been publishing articles on this. You talk to companies about IT OT a lot. Where's the jury out? How do people about IT and OT? How do you get the best from what enterprise IT may be in a firewall in the area and bring that to the operational environment where it's called OT?
Yeah, that's a great question and a challenging one at times. First off, IT technologies really need to embrace OT needs and language, because there's a different set of needs and different way to to talk in a lot of ways. And I can't tell you how many meetings, times we as Momenta have been in meetings where we felt we're like an interpreter translating English to English, like, IT to English to OT English or vice versa. So the key thing about IT companies is they really, really understand scale, but as they are today, they have really big OT gaps around safety, security, and reliability. And it's going to be really important for them to, embrace and bridge to these OT ecosystems, leveraging companies to get to the edge, especially the far edge, because that's really where the language differences become even more important. So, there's a significant percentage you can benefit from IT, that scale part of it, but OT always has that veto power because they're running things that are super critical. And it's not like a web page or something like that doesn't load. It's really, things could blow up and bad things can happen. So you got to embrace both sides of it. And really important is understanding what the OT pain points are. It's not a technology solution, going back to what we talked about earlier. It's what is the problem? What's the solution? What can you really do differently in that situation?
Okay, great. Yeah, Marco, question to you, because you pointed to the skill deficiency in your presentation around, just as Bill described, IT/OT. So you assume you do a large deployment of an IoT solution, and out of a sudden you go into, let's call it a remote area. Let's physically imagine it, and there's no IT staff. So how many times does that happen from your point of view? And how do you see your customers and partners you work with actually reacting to that situation, maybe from your overarching point of view?
Actually, that will happen way more often in the future than it's doing right now. So in the future, we will have way more edge devices out there, sometimes in co-location, so you won't have direct and fast access to them as well. Or you will have cases in which the edge devices won't be accessible, as I said, so maybe burrowed under concrete because they are set in a parking lot for 20 years. So you really have to be able to do that to any device at all. And maybe the approach isn't to plan with the number or percentage of devices who may be not accessible, but being able or having a framework to being able to, if it's necessary, remote handle 100% of the devices remote, or even 0%, so that you can switch between modes as you want, like it's like now with, let's say, remote working, where you want to be able to provide 100% home office as well, and won't be able to have everyone back at the office as well. So that applies to edge computing as well, in my opinion, that you have to have the flexibility to change and adapt to every edge use case you may have in the future without having to change your whole architecture for every case. So you have to remain flexible and agile.
And I would assume, Kai, this is also where things like OTA or so come in, the capability to kind of like not be dependent upon the local staff, right, and do this more automatically, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, there you see even for cars, right? So if you look at Volkswagen, for example, the diesel scandal, right? So I mean, lots of the issues could have been or have been solved with just software updates, right? Recalling the cars would have been, a disaster.
And that applies to IoT at large, of course. No?
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Good. So let's talk about, I think, an aspect that's very close to Farid. I know that because we're actually joined together at the hip in a test bed. It's an automotive test bed. We have the car, in fact, in our building here, which is a security test bed from the IC, and we're really glad to be partnering there. But Farid, so you look at the many different layers from the cloud to the edge. There's a lot of safety, security, particularly security questions involved. So how do you see this environment that is so diverse, that's so multi-layered, being managed, and how do you meet those needs of particularly security, and then also, because it's operational environment, the safety attached to it as well? So your point of view in broader strokes.
Right. This is actually very important topic, especially now that we experienced COVID, and now we see the basically acceleration in adoption of the edge and IoT, because that's how give you your business as usual capability, and also expanding on what you can do, and also the flexibility that you need, especially when you come to the industry, and very, very, I would say, important application use cases like connected vehicles, or as being said in the presentation as well, that there is a zero tolerance with certain use cases and businesses. There is a zero tolerance of breaching or cybersecurity attack, or losing information, or being saved. And to be honest with you, that's one of the challenges of the adoption, because a lot of companies and a lot of factories, they walk away still, or do not think about the adoption of the edge and IoT because of the same reason, because they don't have the trust. So how this being addressed, I mean, there are certain things that I mean from the strategy perspective, and also from the technicality perspective. Of course, companies that were providing security, they have to look at it the end-to-end platform of the security, regardless of the nodes, regardless of, I would say, east to west, north to south, basically, or south to north. Exactly the way that the communication is, and it's happening, and also thinking about the now employing the new technologies like machine learning, and to learn about on the fly about the attacks and about the security and safety of the data. Because if that doesn't address, that will be one of the big challenges going forward, especially when we come to wireless communication, which on top of everything opens up a little bit exposure of the radio frequency, and especially even 5G 16 version that came specifically for this, with less latency and more security, exclusively for I would say IoT, or specifically for IoT and edge. That needs still to be addressed, and that's why certain technology, new technology, which actually you mentioned that we are using also on the card, is like new innovative wireless communications like Li-Fi, which comes with the light communication bases, and can provide another layer of security, especially on top of the radio frequency by its nature. So these are things that's going to happen, and these are things that we're going to see go forward, and we see it more and more innovative, and the progress on the connectivity and security of the connectivity will be adopted and will be developed and come in place for edge and IoT in general.
Okay, great. Yeah. So Gonzalo, kind of like in that context, you mentioned earlier that a lot of your investment focus, or the way you look at it from a Telefonica point of view, is also on the area of cybersecurity. You know, so what are some of the features, if you so will, you look for there that actually tell you this partner is at the cusp of where the IoT security challenge will be, and that you need to get either work with their technology in other places, or at least partner with them. How do you define that from your point of view?
Yeah, in the cyber area, which of course it's closely related to IoT. That's why we put it all together into Telefonica Tech. We are looking for a very different vertical sort of thing, all related to security, which are social automation, threat intelligence, phishing, network security, data security, cloud security, IoT, and even home security as such, even physical and the cloud, right? And also identity management. So we go through all these topics to try to cover like what are all the potential risks that we may have, because we are extremely focused on cybersecurity right now. We cannot allow our clients to have any breach in security, because if we do that, we're dead as a company. So, and that's a pretty hard statement to make, but it's real. So that's why we're investing in many of these areas in cyber, and is one of our main pillars when we're thinking of innovation and investment in new companies.
Okay, great, good. Okay, and I'm sure we could have an hours-long discussion on security and all its different aspects at all different levels. I'd like to switch gears just because we're getting also closer to the end, and So we started with cloud to edge, then we switched around, said edge to cloud, and then we came to the conclusion, well, it's probably a mix of in between. No? Now, when you're a company, sometimes you start from an edge perspective or from a cloud perspective. How do these two parties meet, Bill? How do you see them meeting? The cloud and the edge represented by different market participants. What's the collaboration model that's evolving here? And maybe there's an evolution of that as you look into the future a bit.
I think that's a good question, and it's a hard one because the collaboration really goes back to what is the problem that needs to be solved, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not, and I think a lot of times people will try to embrace a technology element, and they'll go, okay, well, we have to solve this with this technology. No, let's start with the problem. Let's get these smart people from both groups to help go after that problem and really try to come up with a solution that is really robust in that situation. And that takes it's hard because we got a lot of engineers out there and they just love grabbing onto technology. But if you don't start with that angle of it first, you'll probably end up with a lot of POCs and not a lot of solutions. That's kind of my first kind of gut feel on that.
So Kai, you represent Bosch, a large participant, of course, in the IoT space. So if I were to say, you know what, in the future, the cloud companies that we now know will just take over the edge, what would be your response to that? Of course, it would be no way, I would assume. Let's be more refined.
I would say exactly. Many would be, fighting this with every possible way, right? And I think the key to keep, let's say, these companies collaborating is really, standardization as one, right? So let's work on common standards, right? And the other topic is also open source, right? So a lot of stuff can be driven out of the open source world, right? And this helps to bring these parties together, right? And to drive innovation forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very, very interesting. So the jury is out, and there's not just one way to go. I'm just looking at, do we have any questions? I'm looking here in the background. Are there questions that I actually will say we'll answer a lot of questions at the end. I've seen some of them around platforms. I'm looking at Lorena here, who is our assistant in the background, and the particular questions that we should actually bring out here to the speakers. I'm going to have a note, very digital, being handed over to me here.
The
there you go.
Edge,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, this is the real edge. It's the edge right in front of me here.
No,
right
the edge of the cloud.
Yeah, that's right. But there are of course two questions. One, on most occasions, there's one here. Industrial customers are apprehensive of having cloud in their OT. How would one create a sense of security within the minds of the customer? So maybe this may be a broader question. Farid, why don't you start there?
It would be a little bit hard for me actually to go either way, right? It's all depends on, again, back to the use cases that you have and the objectives that you have, and especially if you come to OT, and if you want to get to that again, that's the zero trust zero compromise accepted in there. So it's hard for me to say really how it would be. I would like to see what the other people want to see. Comment on that. Kai, you want to do that?
Sure,
maybe?
Kai.
Sure. I mean, if we talk about manufacturing, right? So our plant, so what Bosch currently is doing is, or starting to do, right? So we have a first pilot running with equipping one of our factories with 5G equipment, right? So, and we actually do not work together with the operator. We manage it ourselves. So we basically have it completely in our own hands. It's one way of dealing with such an issue, right?
Correct. Yeah, very good. And Marco, in terms of that challenge, so when customers of your services approach you, and they may have that same apprehension around the cloud in their factory, is that a recurring problem for you? Is this something you advise them? You say find a good partner to do the job, basically, or why did you pick this technology? What do you tell your partners or your customers then? Good, Marco. Oh, are we on mute?
Okay, now. Yeah, that's a very present problem because, of course, we have many customers, especially from the OT and manufacturing side of use. And it's like with all new technologies, there's always some stop, which is very okay because you don't have to adapt everything with supersonic speed. You have to think about it first, but for every problem there is a solution. So first there was a problem of data backups in the cloud, and they were solved for data encryption at the rest. Then you had the data transferring problems, and you had new solutions for data on the flight. And now you have the problem of OT workloads running in the cloud, and there are also solutions for that. So I can refer to confidential computing, which is growing in the cloud environment. So the cloud hyperscalers have confidential computing so that the workloads are encrypted. So it's more about, I guess, education about the options that are out there and the puzzle pieces, as I already said, the many puzzle pieces that can be taken into account when building an edge environment.
So the bottom line is it's a very diverse challenge. There are many participants that can offer a solution. You need to find a good partner, I guess. That's probably what we would all agree on. I'm looking at a couple of more questions, but I think we're running out of time if I'm not mistaken here. So what I would say is actually, in closing out as a comment, wonderful commitment by you as speakers. I'd like to thank each one of you to actually share your insights and your perspectives with this audience across the globe. I'd like to thank for those of you who got up very early. I understand the further west you go, and who are still on the line all the way east as well. So dear speakers, I appreciate the fact that you actually celebrated with us the 20-year anniversary. We're going to continue this all through the year. So please, for those of you who are on the line, check on the website regularly, aicas.com, for updates on future events. And with a closing remark that Dr. James Hunt, as CEO, will give us here, I'd like to close the call. So James, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I want to thank Marco, Bill, Gonzalez, Kai, and Farid for joining us today. It was a very interesting discussion. As you can hear, when one tries to connect everything to the internet, you bring a lot of, it changes the world. It brings a lot of challenges that we didn't have before. And you get a lot of more data. And of course, this data will really become valuable if it improves the behavior of everything from the edge to the cloud. Now, aicas has 20 years experience bringing IT technology to the embedded systems and bridging that IT and OT gap. And I believe that we have a lot to offer, and the best is yet to come. Thank you, everybody, for joining in today.
Okay, thank you very much, James, and thank you, everybody, and have a good day.